Hello, I'm Patricia Moser, the principal and founder of i3 Advantage. Insight, innovation, and impact are the three I's. It's a high-value consultancy that supports organizations to achieve their aspirations in procurement and supply chain, with a focus on operational excellence, resilience, risk, and the three tiers of sustainability: social, economic, and environmental. I'm somewhat of an industry agnostic. I've held executive roles in organizations across the globe in supply chain and procurement, from everything from healthcare to telecom to distribution and information technology and others. And my most recent corporate iteration was as a chief procurement officer for one of the larger UN agencies. So I've been doing this, a couple of decades. So I keep on saying I started obviously when I was 12. So just to make sure that people think what my age is, but yeah, it's interesting. I've seen the evolution of supply chain. Never has gone as quickly as I would like it to see. Sometimes I still, have, my flat forehead from banging my head against the wall saying, "Don't you understand?" So anyways, so that's me.
Patricia, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I really appreciate it. You talk about, banging your head against the wall, trying to have people understand more of what it is that you do. Recently, the term supply chain, I believe, has become, people are more aware of that. It's become part of people's vocabulary. Over the past couple of years, as we have seen, as a result of whether it's severe weather brought about by climate change, COVID. I was talking to a coworker the other day who can't get a brand new car because car manufacturers can't access these chips. So a lot of people are sort of getting it and understanding it, at least a little bit. I want to ask you this question first off, Patricia. How have these external events, if we want to call them, how have they changed the conversation around the importance of supply chain planning?
So one of the things about supply chain is no one notices it when it works well. Everybody notices when it doesn't. Everyone is obviously talking about supply chain now because it's in the common parlance of a lot of politicians and even regular folk. And so they're saying, oh, well, what about the supply chain? What about the procurement? Why didn't we get the PPE? Da, 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 da. So, but the problem is that it's still being looked at from a tactical perspective. So whether it's supply chain or it's sister procurement, it's how do I get stuff and how then do I get it from here to there? And supply chain is a highly strategic function that can, help or hinder businesses. So when you talk about things like climate change or COVID or that sort of, or those things that have recently wreaked havoc, particularly COVID, on the global supply chain. The question becomes is, could there have been more planning? Could people have known? I think that one of the things that definitively needs to be looked at is how have, organizations looked at end to end. So from my perspective, supply chain is through the entire process. If you're looking at goods, it starts with the manufacturing, and you need to know not only what you're manufacturing, but all the elements that come through. So if you're looking at your tier one suppliers, the ones you have a contract with, do you actually know who they're dealing with throughout the chain? So you can identify potentially the weakest link and then potentially react accordingly. when you talk about, and I'll talk about the area of climate change right now, is, when you're planning, your supply chain, are you actually looking at how things are getting to places? Well, what are the GHG emissions, or are you just leaving that up to your potential supplier and let them figure it out? I always refer to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Ford Prefect, who came up with the invisibility theory that things are invisible when it's somebody else's problem. So if you're not looking beyond where you are now, saying, well, I'm good, they're telling me things and so on, where are you doing your assessments? And I'll give you sort of an example that, is one of my favorite topics, which is wine. If you're on the East Coast and you think you're doing the right thing by buying California wine, and you walk by the Italian wine aisle because you figure that there'll be more climate impact by getting something from overseas. But if you actually do the analysis, the wine from California, because it's being transferred versus shipped, GHG emissions are greater on the California wine versus the wine from Italy. So, we make assumptions in a lot of different things, but you have to get the data and you have to do the analysis. So it's important to look at everything from a 360 view if you want to plan in supply chain accordingly and well.
That's very, very insightful. I will tell my my wine friends about that. That's really interesting. Patricia, you've written recently in the recent past about change management. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you could spend a moment explaining the importance of what you call finding your white-eyed gull when it comes to business and change. I found that really interesting.
Yeah, just to give your audience context.
Yeah.
My son, who is 28, and I go on an adventure holiday every year. Well, not the last 2 years, but generally every year. And our last one was to Lebanon and Jordan. My son is an ornithologist. So we obviously, everywhere we go, we have to start looking at birds and things like that. And then we're driving through Jordan, and he says, well, down in Aqaba, there is the white-eyed gull, and it's a rare gull, and and I'd like to see it, and so on. I'm going, oh my, okay, you're sure. But he did, and I went, okay, let's go. And there's only one place there that you can see it. And we saw it, and it's, kind of it's a cool bird, for particularly someone of my son's profession. But I kind of looked at it and sort of went, okay, well, I'm glad we went here, because now I can tell everybody that I've seen the white-eyed gull. And if you put it against business, there's often times where we are a little bit exasperated and say, oh, I don't want to go there. It's a lot easier for me to move in this forward direction. And so, the question becomes are you keeping yourself from seeing your white-eyed gull because of inherent resistance to doing something a little bit more than what you'd like to do? There was when I get a lot of my inspiration from traveling, and in Valencia, there was a street art on the side of a building where there was this wild horse, and it's bucking, and it's trying to release itself from the tethers of the snails. So if you look again at change from that perspective, you want to go and make a change, but you have a lot of these snails and these naysayers holding you back. The reality is the horse was a lot stronger than the snail, but it allowed itself through, sort of bureaucracy or something to be kept from sort of making that change. So basically, I think it's key for leaders. First of all, if you want to change something, that's great. And I believe in change. I believe in, proper change, like change for positive impact. But you have to also understand that not everybody's there with you to begin with, and they have lots of insight that can save you from making mistakes. So you need to listen and you need to understand and ensure that you bring other people along. You have to socialize it. You have to communicate. And basically, some of your resistors at the beginning can become your greatest allies in implementing the change if you give them a chance to have an impact on it.
That is very insightful. Yes. Patricia, you introduced yourself in your introduction. You talked about doing some work with one of the larger agencies at the UN. When looking at these 17 sustainable development goals that the UN has, how were you able to effectively make a positive impact on these goals in your role? And how would you recommend to others, or what would you recommend to others who want to have an equally positive impact, whether it be locally or even globally?
Okay. So one of the things that I found coming back to North America, because I was overseas for over 5 years, that in North America, a lot of people aren't even aware of the Sustainable Development Goals. A lot of people in supply chain procurement, I've given presentations and I say, do people know what the Sustainable Development Goals are? And a lot of them say no. So first of all, I think it's important for people to educate themselves on it. When I look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and a lot of times for supply chain, they go to responsible consumption and production, decent work and economic growth and so on, but it's a lot more than that. When you're looking from a global context, the opportunity to impact no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, and so on is massive. So all of I can make an argument for all the 17 goals that supply chain can impact. And I'll give you an example. One of the things that I noted when I'm a big fan of supplier diversity. So I have incorporated supplier diversity again for the last couple of decades, a long time before it became in common parlance. But when I went to the UN, I went, great, I can do this on a global scale and support the development of suppliers in country. So we created the Possibilities program. Possibilities means it's not about the here and now, it's about what can be. And actually created a program where we went in country, created a 2-day workshop for businesses to actually advance themselves just generally and get exposure to the UN. The impact of that, and we went to countries like Myanmar, Jordan actually, Brazil, Argentina, Ethiopia, and a few others. And the impact of that was that all of a sudden we were exposing our, potential business to all these local suppliers and for the UN. A lot of our focus was primarily on women-owned businesses in country, women-owned and youth-owned. So when you start supporting women-owned businesses, and particularly in the developing world, the women take the money and they support their children. They bring it back to the household. So you end up getting a decent wage to end poverty. You then end up not having child labor, which is always a concern in some of these places. And then you get quality education and so on. So simple things can make a huge impact. Focusing on, sort of the 3 tiers, as I said, of sustainability, which is social, economic, and environmental. And we implemented a protocol that on every RFP, RFX in some way it was mandatory to have 3 sustainable items in those solicitations. And so when I hear people say, well, it's too difficult, we can't do it, and that sort of thing, I said, if we can do it in South Sudan, then you can do it in North America. So there's a lot of, impact that people can have, and particularly right now as well as part of the Sustainable Development Goals, go back to supply chain risk. Supply chain risk also, you need to create a protocol that ensures that throughout your supply chain, you don't have human rights abuses, slavery. A lot of shipping has slavery, right? So, and, child labor, et cetera, et cetera. COVID is going to bring that to the fore because there's going to be a lot of vulnerable people out there who are looking for any opportunity to get some level of work. So the governments and corporations need to be very careful and do something to ensure that this is not in their supply chain.
Patricia, this has been a very insightful conversation for myself. Thank you so much for it. Before I let you go, if people want to find out more about what you're doing, where can they go?
Well, first of all, you can find me on LinkedIn, and then you can have all the links to where you can go. My website is i3advantage.com, and as well, Twitter is Patricia J. Moser. So I'm around.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much, Patricia.
Hey, thank you.
Power your advertising. Working with Active International enables you to fund your advertising using your company's own products, assets, or even services. We have over 30 years' experience connecting and bringing value to businesses all over the globe, helping many brands scale up into household names. Want to achieve more from your marketing spend? Contact Active International today.